There are two case studies in our textbook that can help us to understand how art may have been used by early humans. Guest describes Blombos Cave in South Africa and prehistoric caves in France and Spain. These sites are important because they are some of the oldest existing examples of prehistoric art, and they demonstrate the antiquity of complex thought. If you follow this link, you can see a short video on cave art. Most of the European caves also have websites that include virtual tours and plenty of photography if you'd like to explore these sites in more detail yourself. There is a long-standing debate within anthropology around one question. Did anatomically modern humans possess culture? Or did culture come later in our development? Anatomically modern humans emerged by at least 200,000 years ago. Some recent discoveries have suggested that we may be even older, 300,000 years or more. However, evidence for behaviorally modern humans doesn't emerge until much, much later. The first humans didn't include any signs of cultural objects, no art, no religion, and they may not have had language or complex social order. To be fair, the oldest human remains are fragmentary, just incomplete bits and pieces of bodies. There are very few materials that could have survived for as long as these bones. In other words, it's possible that the earliest humans had cultural objects, but the chance of any of those objects surviving for hundreds of thousands of years without deteriorating is just too low. Whatever the case, for many years the absence of any clearly cultural objects led many anthropologists to assume that the first people did not possess culture. They may not have even spoken any languages, though they had the capacity for speech. In turn, they would not have possessed the capacity for complex thought or social relationships. Think about that for a moment. How much of your identity, what it means to be human, is dependent on language and on shared social ideas about complex things that aren't immediately visible in the environment, like ideas about religion, about ancestors, about the future, ideas about social relationships beyond simply parents and offspring, recognizing cousins and aunts and uncles as somehow significant. If we had evidence that the earliest humans possessed culture, we could be more certain that they also traded in these complex ideas that we now take for granted as part of the package of being human. Blombos Cave in South Africa is significant because it provides evidence of human creativity long before other archaeological sites. One of the clearest examples is a sign of personal ornamentation, the creation of a necklace made out of shell beads. Each one of these tiny shells would have had to have been carefully drilled to create the holes that would allow them to be threaded together into a necklace. This would have required hundreds of hours of work altogether, and there's no practical reason to do it. It wouldn't have provided any more food to the person who did it. The only reason to do this labor was to create an object that must have been considered beautiful and valuable, work worth doing. And these objects were crafted 70,000 years ago. At Blombos, there are also signs of tools, spear blades and knives, that required multiple stages of production, including the usage of several different specialized tools to achieve the level of precision, strength, and sharpness desired. The simplest forms of stone tools require basically banging rocks together, and when they break in certain ways, they have a sharp edge that could be used to cut plants or slice into animals. However, these simple tools break very easily, and the blades are often crooked and inconvenient. Specialized tools, like the one photographed here, have been carefully chipped away to give a special shape, with sharp edges all around, and they are often a lot stronger and able to be reused and resharpened for much longer. Archaeologists long thought it was impossible that such advanced technology existed this early in our development. Although this object had a utilitarian practical purpose, the ability to create it probably reflects more complex thinking on the part of its inventor. More recently, there's been a lot of excitement about the dates associated with this object. It's a small chunk of ochre, a mineral often used to create reddish pigment like the paint used in cave paintings. Now, ochre is a naturally occurring mineral, so finding a chunk of it within a cave would not ordinarily be such a big deal. However, this chunk of ochre happens to have a cross-hatch pattern onto it. This is a tool that was probably used by an artist to create drawings in the cave or on other objects, but it was itself decorated with art. This is a bit like having a fancy pen or a nice iPad to do your work. There's no practical reason why it should be decorative, but we appreciate the design and it makes our job go that much more smoothly. Some dating techniques push back the birthday for this object to 100,000 years ago, making it potentially the earliest known artwork. Aside from the Blombos Cave in South Africa, Guest also describes several of the best-known European prehistoric art galleries. The oldest is Chauveau Pont d'Arc in France, and I apologize for my French pronunciation. This site dates to about 35,000 BC. Humans occupied and used the cave for time periods, then abandoned it, then occupied it again over the course of thousands of years. When it wasn't occupied by humans, it was often a home for cave bears, which are frankly terrifying nightmare beasts. Altamira Cave in Spain was also occupied around the same time period. The earliest paintings date back to 34,000 BC. What I find most fascinating about Altamira is that paintings were added over a period of 10,000 years. This is roughly the equivalent of the entirety of recorded history twice over. In other words, humans contributed to this record of history for twice as long as our civilizations have existed and learned from one another. I love to wonder what life was like in this time period. How much did culture change over the course of 10,000 years before writing or large population centers? How different will our species be 10,000 years from now? Will some future digital historian look back on this video file and wonder what life was like in the 21st century? Most likely the best known cave paintings in the world are at Lascaux Cave, also in France. This is a more recent art gallery. Over 6,000 images have been painted in this cave complex, dating back to only 15,000 BC. Only 15,000 BC. That's how ancient some of these sites are. The images are divided into three types: animals, humans, and abstract symbols. Some linguistic and cognitive anthropologists have theorized that these images depict visions from trances and thus have a ritualistic purpose. You can imagine entering this cave, total darkness if not for the torches that provide light. Drums are beating, echoing all around. You may have consumed something to cause hallucinations or gone without food for a few days to increase the chances of experiencing some sort of psychedelic vision. The cacophony of sounds and the flickering movement of light across the cave walls would likely make it seem like the painted figures were alive, stampeding all around you. This is sort of the Paleolithic version of IMAX 3D. There have been a lot of studies that try to figure out the purpose of these Paleolithic art galleries. Aside from being places for rituals, it's possible that they played a formative role in the development of human language and complex thought. If it is true that the earliest humans didn't already have language, then the experience of being inside one of these caves, viewing depictions of animals and hearing drums and other sounds, may have triggered the association of sound with image and planted the seeds that led to spoken language. Of course, it's also possible that many of the more complex forms of thinking and behavior that we associate with later humanity may have been with us all along. Even some of our predecessors may have had some of these cognitive tools, although language seems to have been physiologically exclusive to humans and Neanderthals, and probably Denisovans. In the remaining video, I'll share some art and media that students have shared with me over the years, and a few things I find interesting and want to share with all of you.